Think about the single largest investment of your entire life. It is not the home you live in. It is not your stock portfolio or your cryptocurrency holdings. The biggest expense you will ever pay, a cost that consumes 20 to 30% of your lifetime earnings, is taxes. In purely financial terms, taxes are a mandatory insurance premium paid to a monopoly security firm called the state. In exchange for this massive fee, you receive a single, fundamental service guarantee, the safety of your life and your property. This is the foundational transaction of human civilization. Money in exchange for security. But what happens when the security firm you have paid for your entire life suddenly turns its weapons on you at the exact moment you need protection? The recent events involving Alex Jeffrey Pretti in Minneapolis are more than just a human rights tragedy. Under the FinGraphy lens, this is a national-scale financial fraud. Alex Pretti was a premium client of the state. He was a 37-year-old intensive care unit nurse at the Veterans Affairs Hospital. He was a taxpayer. He was a law-abiding citizen. He was a lawful gun owner with a permit to carry, one of the most vetted documents a citizen can possess. He had paid every bill and followed every rule. But when he encountered the state on that January morning, the state delivered its service in the form of 10 bullets. This is why the markets are beginning to tremble. This is why 60 of the top CEOs and the financial elite are turning their backs on the current administration. They are not acting out of pure emotion. They are acting because they see a massive systemic risk. When the state breaks its contract with the taxpayer, it is a sign of sovereign default. No investor wants to pour capital into a market where the board of directors is willing to execute the shareholders. Today, we open the financial files of this case to calculate the true price that the American economy is paying for this brutality. To understand the gravity of this moment, we must slow down time and look through the eyes of a normal American citizen in early 2026. Imagine you are Alex Pretti. You are not a criminal. You have no record. You are the embodiment of a model citizen under the United States Constitution. Holding a concealed carry permit proves that the state has already vetted you as a responsible and law-abiding individual. But on that fateful Saturday morning in Minneapolis, all rules of civilization were erased. The bystander videos from the scene show something far beyond a standard law enforcement operation. From a tactical perspective, we are witnessing a process known as unnecessary escalation of violence. The first stage was sensory deprivation. Federal agents used high-concentration pepper spray and tear gas directly on Alex. In tactical science, removing a target's vision is the first step to inducing panic and disorientation. When a human being is blinded and suffocating, their biological survival instinct kicks in. They might curl up or move their arms in confusion. These are biological reflexes, not acts of resistance. The second stage was physical punishment. Even though Alex had lost his ability to see, the officers did not choose to use handcuffs or soft restraints. They chose to use rifle butts and batons to inflict heavy physical trauma. This is where the line between law enforcement and torture disappears. Why beat a man who is already blind and helpless? The answer lies in the psychology of power. They demand immediate, total submission. The third stage is the most critical for our legal analysis. The video clearly shows that a federal agent reached into Alex's waistband and removed his firearm. At that moment, Alex Pretti was completely unarmed. He was lying on the ground, in pain, disoriented, and entirely harmless. According to the rules of engagement used by both military and international police forces, firing upon an unarmed and restrained target is a war crime. But the fourth and final stage is what sends shivers down the spine of anyone with a conscience. While Alex lay there, they opened fire. Not a warning shot, not a shot to disable. They fired a volley of rounds at close range with the intent to terminate life. In elite tactical units like SWAT, this is called neutralization. But in the language of morality, we must call it what it is, an execution. This brutality is not random. It is the result of a controversial ideology taught to officers known as Killology, or the science of killing. This doctrine teaches officers that every citizen is a potential threat rather than someone to be protected. Alex Pretti was the victim of this toxic mindset. A system that views its citizens as enemies will eventually fire upon its own people. This event has torn the veil of hypocrisy from the debate over the Second Amendment. For decades, the National Rifle Association and conservative politicians have repeated the slogan that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Alex Pretti was the perfect good guy with a gun. He carried it to protect his community exactly as encouraged. But when he was killed, the silence from those who claimed to defend gun rights was deafening. This silence reveals a painful truth about American politics. Gun rights in this country are not applied equally. There is a massive double standard based on political identity. Compare this to the events of January 6th, where thousands of protesters stormed the Capitol, some of whom were armed. The former president and his media machine called them patriots. The police showed extreme restraint, but Alex Pretti and Renee Good, who were merely present at protests or living their lives, were treated as the most dangerous terrorists. This difference comes down to the concept of enemy identification. To certain extreme movements, anyone not wearing the red hat is stripped of their status as a citizen. They are dehumanized. When you strip the humanity from your opponent, you no longer feel guilt when pulling the trigger. Now we must pivot to an aspect a few discussed, but that determines the survival of any regime: economics. Why is the administration truly panicking? The answer is not on the streets. It is in the boardrooms of Wall Street and Silicon Valley. Historically, the economic elite supports the Republican Party because of tax cuts and deregulation. However, there is one thing that capital fears more than high taxes: instability. Capital is a nervous creature. Investment flows to places with political and social stability. When Minneapolis becomes a battlefield, when federal agents act like an occupying army, the political risk premium for America skyrockets. More than 60 top CEOs in Minnesota, along with the NBA Players Association, signed an open letter of protest. This is unprecedented. The NBA is not just a sports league. It is a multi-billion-dollar money machine and a tool of American soft power. When stars like Steph Curry or coaches like Steve Kerr speak out, they represent billions of dollars in global brand value. These CEOs understand that the American consumer economy is built on trust. People only go out to shop and spend when they feel safe. If stepping outside means risking being shot by the people paid by your taxes, the consumer stops spending. The collapse of social order leads to the collapse of supply chains and domestic purchasing power. The letter from the CEOs was a cold, calculated ultimatum from the market. The message was clear: you can mislead the public with slogans, but you cannot hide the numbers on a balance sheet. This chaos is hurting the bottom line. In the world of capitalism, when you threaten the profits of the elite, you sign the death warrant of your political career. We also need to look at the silence inside the Timberwolves stadium. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of social consensus. When an entire stadium, from the VIP seats to the nosebleeds, feels disgust toward the government, it is a sign that the democratic immune system is beginning to fight back against a viral infection of authoritarianism. As we read through the thousands of comments on social media, we see a deeply concerning psychological phenomenon. Some people say things like, "He must have done something wrong to get shot," or "the police were just doing their job." Why, in the face of a clear video execution, do some people choose to look away or defend the killer? To decode this, we must look at the 1961 Milgram experiment at Yale University. Milgram proved a dark truth about human nature. When an authority figure like a doctor or a police officer gives an order, 65% of ordinary people are willing to perform brutal acts, including delivering lethal electric shocks, because they believe they are following orders. Applying this to the case of Alex Pretti, we see this mechanism at work. To extreme supporters, the federal uniform and the badge are symbols of absolute authority. When that authority says Alex was a threat, their brains switch off critical thinking and switch on blind obedience. Furthermore, we see the just world hypothesis. This is a cognitive bias where people want to believe the world is fair. They tell themselves that good things happen to good people and bad things to bad people. If they accept that Alex was a good man and still got killed, it means they could be killed too. To protect their own sense of safety, they are forced to blame the victim. This is not innate evil, it is the cowardice of the mind in the face of a brutal reality. History has taught us that the silence and the rationalization of evil are its greatest accomplices. When the regimes of the past began classifying people, many citizens told themselves the government must have a reason. We know how that ended. The comments defending the shooting of Alex Pretti today are ghostly echoes from the past, warning us that humanity has not yet learned the lesson of vigilance against power. While the outrage on the streets provides the fuel for change, the machine that actually grinds down justice is hidden in dry legal documents. The greatest barrier to prosecuting the officers who killed Alex Pretti is not a lack of evidence. It is a bizarre legal doctrine called qualified immunity. Let me explain this in the simplest but most terrifying way. This doctrine is not in the Constitution. It was created by the Supreme Court in 1982. The original intent seemed reasonable, to protect public officials from frivolous lawsuits so they could do their jobs. But over 4 decades, it has mutated into a monster. The rule works like this. You can only sue a police officer if you can prove their actions violated a clearly established constitutional right. This sounds easy, but it is a linguistic trap. The courts require this clearly established right to be based on a previous case with nearly identical facts. For example, if a court previously ruled that police cannot set a dog on a person who is lying down, that does not mean you are protected if a police officer shoots you while you are lying down. The court might say the previous case was about a dog, and this case is about a gun, so the officer did not know they were doing something wrong. Therefore, they are innocent. Can you see the madness in this logic? It creates an infinite loop. If no one has ever been convicted for shooting a man in a blue shirt at 9 o'clock at night after using pepper spray, then the officer who does it today gets immunity. In the case of Alex Pretti, the lawyers for the officers will certainly cling to this rotten life raft. They will argue that there is no legal precedent saying that shooting a man who is just disarmed in the context of a border operation is a clear violation of the Constitution. If a judge agrees, the case will be thrown in the trash before it even reaches a jury. This is why lawmakers and reformers are calling qualified immunity a license to kill. The fight for Alex Pretti is not just about one life. It is about tearing down the legal wall that has shielded brutality for half a century. If this wall does not fall, there will be thousands more like him in the future. We often think of justice and economics as parallel lines that never meet. But in a globalized world, they are intertwined like two snakes. The tragedy in Minneapolis is a black swan event for the American economy under the current leadership. Look at the reaction of the stock market and the giant corporations. Why did 60 CEOs, who usually only care about quarterly reports, rush to sign a political protest? It is because they smell the danger of institutional collapse. In macroeconomics, there is an index called ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. The massive investment funds like BlackRock or Vanguard do not just look at profits today. They look at social risk. A nation where police can arbitrarily execute citizens is categorized as a high governance risk. When the images of Alex Pretti being shot went viral globally, it sent a message to every foreign investor that your assets and your people in America are no longer safe. The law here no longer protects private property or human rights in a consistent way. Foreign direct investment, or FDI, is like a sensitive bird. It flies away the moment it sees storm clouds. The public stance by the NBA Players Association only makes this economic wound deeper. The NBA is a billion-dollar cultural export. When stars like Steph Curry criticize the administration, it erodes the soft power of the United States. Competitors like China or Europe look at this and say, "The American model is failing. Come do business with us instead." The current leader, as a businessman, understands this better than anyone. His panic does not come from his conscience. It comes from seeing the economic foundation, the only thing keeping his elite support alive, beginning to crack. The CEO letter was an ultimatum. Either restore order based on the law, or we will pull the plug on this economy. Let us take a moment to dissect the response from the administration, specifically Gregory Bovino, the head of the Border Patrol. When he stood before the microphones and declared that the shooter was the victim, he was not just lying. He was performing a sophisticated psychological tactic known as DARVO. This stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. This is the classic weapon of abusers, from domestic violence to political oppression. First comes the denial. They deny the obvious facts shown in the video. They use soft language like an unfortunate incident or a tactical encounter instead of shooting or killing. The goal is to soften the public's perception. Next is the attack. They attack the character of Alex Pretti. They dig through his past, looking for any small flaw to prove he was not perfect. The underlying logic is that only a saint deserves to live, and an ordinary person with any mistake deserves to be shot. Finally, the reversal. This is the most brazen step. They turn the man with the gun into a victim of pressure and turn the man on the ground into the aggressor. But look at the body language of these officials when they speak. The rapid blinking, the tight grip on the podium, the higher pitch of the voice. Behavioral analysts call this the leakage of deception. Their subconscious knows they are lying, and their bodies are betraying their words. The good news is that the American public in 2026 has been vaccinated against this virus of manipulation. Thanks to the prevalence of cameras and social media, people can compare the words of officials with the reality of the image. The gap between those two things is where trust dies. And when a people no longer believe the language of their government, that regime has only one tool left: raw violence. Where does the American political chessboard go after this shock? Based on game theory, we can see three core scenarios for the period between 2025 and 2028. Scenario 1 is the iron fist. The administration feels cornered and decides to double down. They will refuse all calls for reform and increase the militarization of the police to crush the next protests. The result will be a deeply divided America, with autonomous zones in certain cities and security fortresses in others. This is the path to a cold civil war. Scenario 2 is the tactical concession. Under pressure from the financial elite and fearing the loss of moderate voters, the government sacrifices a few scapegoats. The officer who shot Alex Pretti will be prosecuted, and a few small reforms will be passed. Everything calms down, the markets recover, but the root cause remains. This is the most likely scenario, but also the most dangerous because it puts the resistance back to sleep. Scenario 3 is the Great Reconstruction. This is the path that Alex Pretti and Renee Good sacrificed their lives for. The outrage transforms into a massive wave of voters that sweeps the extremists out of power. The George Floyd Act and the Alex Pretti Act are passed, ending qualified immunity and restructuring the entire police system into a community protection model instead of a suppression model. This is the hardest path, but it is the only way for America to truly heal. As night falls on Minneapolis, candles are still burning at the spot where Alex fell. That candlelight is thin against the wind, but it carries a massive symbolic power. It reminds us that even in the darkest hours of history, the light of conscience never fully goes out. We must not allow the names Renee Good and Alex Jeffrey Pretti to become just lines of news that drift away with the morning paper. Remember Renee, the young woman with a heart of fire who yearned for justice. Remember Alex, the man with the courage to protect others even when he knew the danger. Their deaths are a powerful indictment of our collective conscience. They ask the question, where will you stand in this flow of history? Will you be the one who turns away, or will you be the one who shares the truth? Do not wait until the rifle butt knocks on your own door to start speaking up. Do not wait until your own loved ones become victims to demand justice. Justice is not a gift handed down from above. Justice is the reward for those brave enough to fight for it. I am FinGraphy. Thank you for having the courage to face the truth with us today. Please share this analysis, not to spread hate, but to wake up the consciences that are sleeping. Goodbye, and we will see you again in a better America. The concept of a social contract is not a dry academic theory. It is the ledger of our civilization. When we look at the macro financial data of the last month, we see a disturbing trend in the bond markets. Investors are beginning to price in social unrest as a permanent factor in the American economy. This is what we call the fragility of the system. In the past, the United States was seen as the ultimate safe haven because of the rule of law. But the rule of law is only as strong as the trust people have in those who enforce it. If the enforcement becomes arbitrary, if it becomes a tool of a single political faction, the safe haven disappears. We are seeing a capital flight that is not just about money, it is a flight of talent and ideas. In the medical community, the death of Alex Pretti has sent a shockwave. Nurses and doctors, the backbone of our society, are asking themselves why they should continue to serve a system that views them as targets. The VA hospital where Alex worked is more than just a workplace. It is a symbol of the debt the country owes to its veterans. To have one of its healers executed by the agents of the same government he served is a betrayal of the highest order. This creates a psychological vacuum. When the healers and the protectors are afraid, the fabric of society begins to unravel at the seams. We must also analyze the role of the media in this 2026 environment. We are no longer in an era where a single broadcast can define the truth. We are in a decentralized information war. The administration tried to control the narrative by releasing edited footage, but the citizen journalists and bystanders provided the full context. This is the ultimate check and balance of the modern age. The truth is no longer a top-down broadcast. It is a bottom-up mosaic. Every person with a smartphone is now a witness to history. This is why the state is so desperate to control the digital space. But as we have seen in Minneapolis, you cannot delete the memory of a community. You cannot erase the pain of a family. As we conclude this deep dive, we look at the numbers one last time. 60 CEOs. 2 lives lost in 3 weeks. Millions of dollars in property damage. Billions in lost market confidence. But the most important number is one. One voice. Your voice. The economy is not some abstract machine. It is the sum of our choices. If we choose to accept brutality, our economy will reflect that decay. If we choose to demand accountability, we can build a foundation that is truly unshakable. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance, and the price of a stable economy is a just society. The events in Minneapolis are a mirror reflecting the soul of the nation. What we see in that mirror might be terrifying, but it is necessary to look. We cannot fix what we refuse to see. The market has given its verdict. The people have given their verdict. Now, it is up to the architects of our future to decide if they will listen or if they will continue to burn the house down to keep themselves warm. We will continue to track the data, we will continue to follow the money, and we will continue to tell the stories that others are too afraid to touch. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay human. The numbers will always tell a story, but only we can decide how that story ends. This has been a FinGraphy special report. We will continue to monitor the situation in Minneapolis and provide updates as the legal battles over the Qualified Immunity Act of 2025 continue to unfold in the halls of Congress. The eyes of the world are on America, and the eyes of history are on us. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your commitment to the truth. We will be back soon with more deep dive analysis into the forces that shape our world. In the final analysis, we must consider the long-term impact on the American dream itself. For generations, the promise of the United States was that if you worked hard and followed the rules, you could build a life of dignity and safety. But for people like Alex Pretti, who did exactly that, the dream turned into a nightmare. This disillusionment is the most expensive cost of all. When a generation stops believing in the possibility of justice, they stop investing in the future. They stop starting businesses, they stop buying homes, they stop participating in the civic life that makes a nation great. This is the hidden deficit. It does not appear on the federal budget, but it is more dangerous than any national debt. It is a deficit of hope. The 60 CEOs who signed that letter realize that a country without hope is a country without customers. They are acting to save their own interests, yes, but in doing so, they are acknowledging a fundamental truth. A healthy economy cannot exist in a sick society. The healing must begin with the truth. It must begin with an admission that the system has failed and a commitment to rebuild it from the ground up. As we sign off, we think of the family of Alex Pretti and the family of Renee Good. Their names will be engraved in the history of the struggle for a better America. May their memories be a blessing, and may their sacrifice be the catalyst for the change we so desperately need. This is the end of our report, but it is only the beginning of the conversation. Let us keep talking, let us keep pushing, and let us never forget what is at stake. The future of the country and the future of our shared prosperity depends on what we do next. The global response to the Minneapolis incident has also begun to shift the geopolitical landscape. Allies of the United States are expressing concern, while adversaries are using the footage for their own propaganda. This is the erosion of moral authority. In the game of international relations, moral authority is a hard currency. It allows a nation to lead, to negotiate, and to inspire. When that currency is devalued by images of domestic brutality, every diplomatic mission becomes harder. Every trade deal becomes more expensive. The 60 CEOs are aware that their global operations are tied to the image of America. If America is seen as a place of chaos and state violence, American brands lose their luster. This is why the NBA's involvement is so significant. Basketball is a global language. When a player wears a jersey with a message of justice, that message reaches millions of people in Beijing, in Paris, and in Lagos. It is a form of cultural diplomacy that the State Department cannot replicate. The fact that the League is in alignment with the CEOs and the protesters shows a rare moment of national unity against a common threat. That threat is the abandonment of our core values for the sake of political power. We must also look at the role of technology in this conflict. The use of facial recognition and surveillance by federal agents in Minneapolis has raised questions about the right to privacy in the 21st century. If the state can track you, identify you, and target you for exercising your right to protest, then the First Amendment is effectively dead. This is another area where the CEOs are concerned. Many of these leaders run technology companies that rely on the trust of their users. If they are seen as complicit in state surveillance, their business models will collapse. The intersection of civil rights and digital rights is the new frontier of the struggle for freedom. In conclusion, the story of Alex Pretti is a warning to us all. It is a warning that the institutions we rely on are fragile and that they require our active participation to remain healthy. It is a warning that the price of indifference is the loss of everything we hold dear. But it is also a story of hope. It is the story of a community that refused to be silent. It is the story of leaders who finally found their voices. And it is the story of a nation that still has the chance to choose a better path. Thank you for being part of this journey. We will see you in the next episode.